History remembers two giants, Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler, whose ambitions redrew the map of Europe. Both rose from obscurity, commanding armies and reshaping nations. Napoleon, a product of the Enlightenment, sought to unify Europe under French law and meritocracy. Hitler, fueled by hate and defeat, aimed for a racial empire built on extermination. Their methods, motives, and legacies diverged sharply. Napoleon built, Hitler destroyed. By comparing their conquests and failures, we see why one is remembered as a military genius, the other as an architect of horror. This is the story of two conquerors and why one proved the more effective master of war. The ascent to absolute power is rarely a gentle stroll. It's a treacherous climb. Every conqueror's rise is dramatic, filled with pivotal moments and calculated risks. Napoleon's ascent began amidst the swirling chaos of the French Revolution, a period of immense upheaval and opportunity. In this revolutionary environment, talent trumped birth and tradition. Advancement was based on merit, not lineage. His decisive victories at Toulon and in the streets of Paris, defending the revolutionary government, rapidly propelled him to national hero status. The people saw in him a leader who could bring stability and glory. By 1799, exploiting the instability of the Directory, he seized power in a swift and decisive coup, becoming first consul, effectively the ruler of France. And then, in a move that solidified his ambition, he crowned himself emperor 5 years later, a symbolic act that echoed the Roman emperors of old. He was ruling France through a combination of sheer military ability, political acumen, and impeccable timing. In stark contrast, Hitler's path to power was forged in the crucible of Germany's humiliating defeat after World War I. The nation was wounded and its pride shattered. A failed artist who transformed himself into a fiery orator, captivating audiences with his passionate speeches, he skillfully channeled widespread national resentment and economic anxiety into the burgeoning Nazi Party. After a failed coup attempt and a stint in prison, he learned a crucial lesson: to seize power legally through the ballot box. The devastating Great Depression provided him with the perfect opportunity. Promising jobs to the unemployed and scapegoats for the nation's woes, he became chancellor in 1933. Within a matter of months, he systematically dismantled German democracy, consolidating absolute and total control over the nation. Napoleon rose to power through a combination of merit, military brilliance, and revolutionary fervor. Hitler, on the other hand, rose by exploiting fear, resentment, and division within a fractured society. Both men ultimately seized absolute power, but their methods, and the fundamentally different worlds they subsequently built, couldn't have been more divergent. Their respective climbs to power irrevocably set the stage for the vast empires they would each attempt to forge, reshaping the map of Europe and beyond. The world, irrevocably altered by their actions, would never, ever be the same again. Throughout history, armies have been the engines that powered the rise and fall of empires. They were the instruments of conquest, the shield of defense, and the embodiment of a nation's strength. Napoleon revolutionized warfare with the corps system, a groundbreaking organizational structure that changed the face of battle. These were independent, fast-moving units led by talented marshals, each a skilled commander in their own right, capable of making decisions on the fly. His Grande Armée was a meritocracy, where promotion was based on skill and bravery, not birthright or social standing. It was inspired by loyalty to Napoleon and the promise of glory on the battlefield, a powerful motivator for soldiers facing unimaginable dangers. Soldiers fought for France and perhaps more importantly for him, their charismatic leader who inspired unwavering devotion. They were willing to endure hardships with unmatched spirit, pushing themselves to the limit in the name of their emperor and their nation. Decades later, Hitler rebuilt Germany's military, flouting international treaties and preparing for a new era of conquest. He unleashed Blitzkrieg, a new and terrifying form of warfare. This involved fast, coordinated attacks that overwhelmed enemy defenses with speed and precision. It was a combined arms approach, integrating tanks and air power to devastating effect. The Wehrmacht's early victories stunned the world, demonstrating the power of this new military doctrine. However, Hitler's distrust of his generals, his constant meddling in military affairs, and his ideological interference ultimately led to disaster, undermining the Wehrmacht's effectiveness. Unlike Napoleon, who, despite his flaws, understood the importance of military expertise, Hitler's army was tainted by the SS, a brutal organization that prioritized ideology over military effectiveness. This ultimately led to turning conquest into genocide, a horrific stain on the history of warfare. Napoleon's military innovations changed Europe, ushering in a new era of warfare and political upheaval. Hitler's turned war into terror, unleashing unprecedented destruction and suffering upon the world. Their armies reflected their visions, their values, and their ultimate goals. One sought to build an empire, however flawed, based on conquest and ambition. The other aimed for annihilation, driven by a hateful ideology that sought to exterminate entire populations. The difference between these two visions would ultimately define their legacies, shaping how they are remembered in history. In war, leadership is everything, the deciding factor between victory and defeat, between glory and infamy. Greatness is proven on the battlefield. Napoleon's masterpiece was Austerlitz. Outnumbered, he lured the enemy in, then shattered them with a brilliant counterattack. The victory made him master of Europe, his strategy still studied today. Hitler's triumph was the fall of France in 1940. Defying expectations, he bypassed the Maginot Line, sending tanks through the Ardennes and trapping Allied forces. France collapsed in weeks, shocking the world. Both victories were bold, innovative, and devastating. Yet, while Napoleon's genius lay in deception and timing, Hitler's relied on speed and surprise. Their greatest battles defined their reputations and set the course for their empires. But victory on the battlefield is only the beginning. The true test is what comes after. Conquest is only half the story, the initial act of taking territory. But how one chooses to rule reveals the conqueror's true nature, their long-term vision, and their ultimate goals. Napoleon sought to unify Europe, at least under his own leadership, abolishing feudalism and spreading the Napoleonic Code, a revolutionary set of laws for its time, legal equality, ensuring that all citizens were treated fairly under the law, religious tolerance, allowing people to worship as they pleased, and modern administration, streamlining governance for efficiency. He installed loyalists to maintain control, taxed heavily to fund his ambitions, and conscripted men into his armies, but aimed for integration of conquered territories, not annihilation of their people. His empire sparked resistance from those who valued their independence, yet left a legacy of reform that shaped modern Europe. Hitler's rule, in stark contrast, was built on terror, brutal oppression, and a twisted racial hierarchy. In the East, Nazi policy meant extermination, the systematic murder of entire populations, enslavement, forcing millions into brutal labor camps, and plunder, stealing resources and cultural treasures on a massive scale. The SS followed the army, turning conquest into genocide, a horrifying descent into barbarity. Western Europe was exploited for its resources and manpower. Eastern Europe was utterly devastated, reduced to rubble and ashes. Napoleon built states, however flawed. Hitler built graveyards, monuments to his inhumanity. Their empires reveal the starkest contrast imaginable. One of administration, however authoritarian, the other of organized murder on an industrial scale. How they ruled, the choices they made, shaped how history remembers them, and the lessons we draw from their reigns. Empire or terror, the choice defined their legacies and continues to resonate today. Every conqueror faces a reckoning. For both it came in Russia's vast, frozen expanse. Napoleon invaded in 1812, seeking a quick victory, but the Russians retreated, burning everything. Starved and frozen, his army collapsed. Only a fraction survived. The myth of his invincibility was shattered. In 1941, Hitler repeated the mistake, launching Operation Barbarossa. Blitzkrieg faltered against Soviet resilience and brutal winter. Hitler's racist ideology blinded him to the enemy's strength and fueled brutal occupation, sparking fierce resistance. Refusing to retreat, he lost entire armies. Both were undone by overreach and hubris, but Hitler's defeat was sealed by hate as much as by cold. Russia broke their empires and exposed their fatal flaws. The road to ruin runs through Moscow. Side by side, the verdict is clear for all to see. Napoleon and Hitler both shook Europe to its core, but only one was a true master of conquest and governance. Napoleon built through innovation, law, and efficient administration. His empire, though flawed in many respects, was functional and left a lasting legacy. Hitler's was built solely on terror, fueled by hate, and resulting in destruction. His Reich ultimately collapsed in ruin, shame, and infamy. Napoleon inspired fierce loyalty and spread vital reforms. Hitler sowed only death and despair. Napoleon's greatest error was strategic overreach on the battlefield. Hitler's was a fundamental ideological blindness. One sought to build, the other only destroyed. In the end, Napoleon stands as the far more capable and ultimately effective architect of empire. His profound mastery of both war and statecraft endures to this day. History remembers the crucial difference between the two.